Welcome to Chapter 10. In this chapter, we're going to talk about VPN management. So our learning objectives and key concepts are going to be describing the fundamental functions of virtual private networks, otherwise known as VPNs, the common VPN technologies, the elements of VPN implementation and management. The concepts you're going to get from this are the best practices for managing VPNs, VPN policy creation, VPN deployment planning for the enterprise, and the general nature and source of threats that occur against VPNs. And lastly, we're going to touch on a little bit of VPN troubleshooting. So, what are the VPN management best practices? Well, of course, you want to have something that has built-in redundancy. What is redundancy, you say? In the concept of business continuity for solutions, the idea of having something to come up and replace something in case it fails. So, if you have something, let's say in your personal life, let's say your car breaks down, you may have a bicycle as a redundant form of transportation, or you may have a commuter pass where you can ride the public transportation. So these are some things you can use to have a redundancy plan or a backup plan in case of something happens. So when we're talking about IT solutions, usually this means of having, a hot failover, which means two active nodes working as one. One fails, the other one will take on all the load of traffic. You can have a hot warm failover in which, one system is taking all the traffic, but in case that system fails, the other one will automatically take over the other ones. But most of the time, it is not taking any traffic at all, hence the term warm. And then you can have a hot and cold one, which means, your redundant system is ready to go, but it is turned off. And you don't turn it on until the other one goes down. And the hot-cold situation requires a manual intervention and enabling of something for that redundancy. So when you're creating your best practices, you have to figure out and choose which one is going to be right for your solution. All right. The next thing to do is you have to choose the right VPN product. When you're out there, you're going to see a number of vendors that do VPN products. You're going to have Cisco. You're going to have companies like Palo Alto. You're going to have Checkpoint, and just Juniper is another one. A lot of these offer differing VPN solutions that might actually be the right for your enterprise environment. So during your evaluation, you're going to evaluate a number of different vendors to determine what is the current solution that you're going to need that's going to suit your needs and your budget. The next thing you have to do is develop a VPN policy. And policy is just a set of rules that govern what and when a VPN is to be used and under what conditions the VPN is to be used. The other thing you want to do is you want to prohibit split tunneling. Split tunneling is a concept where at one time it was popular when bandwidth was not very predominant out there in the internet. So what they did is they allowed only traffic going into the corporate network to be routed through the VPN, while other internet traffic and other things could be directed through the local connection to the ISP. Now, this has turned out to be a bad concept for security. Why, you may ask? Well, functionality, it's great. You don't have to overburden and overuse the corporate resources for internet access from your clients. But on the other hand, somebody can download corporate material, proprietary confidential data, and then they can exfiltrate it outside of normal corporate controls that will allow it to connect to someone on the internet and send it outside the normal restraints that a corporate system can provide. So you want to prohibit that from occurring on all your corporate assets. Um, you also want to practice vulnerability management. And vulnerability management is the process of, understanding what vulnerabilities are being um, exposed, either through, software or operating system vulnerabilities from vendors. You get your CVE notifications, and you have to understand when to patch and when not to patch. Uh, there's also the usage of multi-factor authentication. We're going to cover that a little bit later too. And then we're going to talk about the most neglected thing of anywhere in IT is documenting your implementation plan. Now, when I was younger, I didn't really believe in all that documentation. It's like, we got to hurry up and get this up. We got to get it going. And whoever comes after me can figure it out. Nowadays, it's my golden rule is document, document, and document. Documentation is really important to use in case we have a failure or for others to be able to follow in your footsteps as you've moved on. So it is best practice and it's ethically responsible for you to document all of your actions. We're going to talk about how to monitor your VPN availability. In case your VPN goes down, this could be a problem with the continuity of business, and it could lead to a loss of productivity, which could have monetary ramifications. And then the other thing is you need to also make sure you perform regular reviews of your capacity and usage. You need to perform your backups and make sure you're doing proper updates. So, the built-in redundancy of VPNs, let's go into that in a little bit more. Most VPNs use a failover or load balancing approach. Again, as I touched on just briefly before, we have that hot, hot, or hot, warm, and those are failover. Hot, hot is more of a load balancing mechanism where we keep it. A good best practice is to keep a spare VPN product or firewall, or basically anything you can. Have an inventory where you can have one of them on the shelf, configured and ready to go to just kind of plug it in whenever you need to, so you can RMA the other product that fails. And the RMA is basically where you call up your manufacturer and they return to manufacturer and replace. So that's what basically an RMA is. So if you ever heard the term you need to RMA something, uh, you need to basically ship that system back to a manufacturer and obtain a replacement from that manufacturer that's covered under warranty. Now, one thing we have to look at, if a VPN solution is based up in the cloud, we need to ensure the redundancy is clearly spelled out and guaranteed in what is called the service level agreement. The service level agreement is a contractual obligation that you are purchasing into under your contract of service that guarantees a certain amount of availability, and any downtime under that, there might be penalties or remunerations paid back to you in the event that they do not meet that level of service needed to maintain that VPN or service. So, how are we going to choose the right VPN product for our environment, or for your environment rather? So we have to make sure we document the requirements. So this is where you get all of your interested parties who are going to be using the VPN service, and you find out, basically you get a wish list. I wish it could do this. I wish it could do that. I wish it could wash the windows on my car daily, etc., etc. You're gonna then grab, you're gonna go out and you're gonna look at all your vendors, and you're gonna determine the capabilities of each VPN product you review. At that point, you're gonna stack rank it based on that wish list or list of requirements. Now, one thing I failed to mention just a moment ago, that list of requirements should be ranked on the most important to, uh, I'm not going to say least important, but to the optional nice to haves. Nice to have it, but if we don't have it, it's not a deal killer. The must-haves or the required are, if it's not there, we're going to move on to a different product. Okay? So after you evaluate your own documented requirements and stack rank them, based on, what has to be there, you can use this to evaluate all the different VPN products you review. Once you have that list, you're going to go ahead and say, hey, you know what? I work for company ABC. I got a friend over, you know, in the industry who works for company XYZ. I'm going to check with him and see how they do their VPN and say, hey, you have any advice for me? And you can check around with other folks. You're going to meet these other folks through, like, say, different meetings. Like if you join ISSA, by the way, our college has a great ISSA program. I really recommend you look into that and joining that as soon as possible. And also the area ISSA uh, organization. You can also join ISACA or other organizations in your area that cater to cybersecurity. In these, you'll network and meet with other people, and these are folks you can discuss honestly about what you're going to do and how to do some implementations. One thing about our industry, it seems like a lot of people are always willing to help each other out because, in essence, we're trying to secure ourselves and everyone else against common enemies. So, there you have it. Uh, After you talk to your peers, you're going to narrow your list down some more. You might find, VPN 1234 is unreliable, and you know, a couple of your other peers say, they regret ever getting themselves involved with that company. So you may want to just kind of avoid them or something like that. At this point, you're going to find out, okay, who you've heard good things about, and if they meet your needs, you're going to start really digging into industry literature and their information about what they offer, their white papers, kind of maybe take some of their training and do this. Uh, Heed warning: you want to avoid purchasing the products based on what they promise to deliver in the future. You know, don't trust any vendor in that way. Uh, you want to look at what they have to deliver right now, and if those meet your needs, not something they say, we'll have it next month, and then you find out something got delayed and it won't be available in 5 years, and until then, you're stuck with this product for 5 years until they can deliver something. So don't ever do anything like that until you have exactly what they need right out of the box. And then you also want to talk about checking around different resellers and consultants out there to see what they can offer and help you with your implementation plans and all that. All right, so after we have this, we're going to develop our VPN policy. And these are basically all your rules for using the VPN. You know, is it only for the sales work? Is it for anybody who's a remote worker? And you create a policy framework which says Yeah, if you're going to be using the VPN, you have to be, use, multi-factor authentication. You have to have a passphrase, 12 characters or 240 characters, whatever you want to do. You can create that policy framework, which is going to enable that. Again, it's best practice to prohibit any type of split tunneling out there. And this setting allows simultaneous access to both untrusted, networks like the internet, along with your secured corporate VPN connection. And it opens the door to networks and other things that could be coming in, and opens an avenue to your enterprise environment that you may not want to have open. So that's a key to kind of prohibit that. One thing you want to do is looking at each client, you want to make sure that the endpoints are already patched and secure before you allow them onto your VPN. Most VPNs have what is called a posture checking before you are allowed on the network. And then what it does, it runs a script that checks, your patch levels. Uh, you can also check, if you have your antiviruses enabled, your host firewalls enabled, etc. All these kind of things that are out there that, are checked when you're on the corporate network. They can also validate that these are enabled on a remote network. And let's say something hasn't been patched in a while. You had an employee, they went on vacation for 6 months. They turned off their computer, they took a around the world cruise or something like that, or sabbatical or something. They come back in, they log on their VPN, and all of a sudden they get put what's in called quarantine. And until they're fully patched, they're not allowed on that network. So they're put on a quarantine network to where, you know, software updates and patches and all that get delivered to them. And then they get posture checked or rebooted and told to come back in later where the check until they get a check that passes. Now, you can require, the antivirus, anti-malware, intrusion detection, firewall software, on anything you want in your organizational owned computers. All right, and that's always something that should be reviewed and required. Um, if your company decides to try and do the BYOD, bring your own device, or personally owned equipment that meets, your corporate standards, make sure that they have uh, a good antivirus on them that can be tested, or a list of antiviruses they should do. Uh, it's a terrible idea to bring your own device nowadays because you lose control of that. If you're running any kind of a secure environment and bring your own device is allowed, then you really don't have a secure environment. Uh, you might want to position it so that it's probably better to issue standard devices to all employees. They can have their own personal devices for personal use and a business device for business use. Uh, I carry, a work phone and I carry a personal phone. I do not do personal data on my work devices. I do not use business data on any of my personal devices. So that is something that is essential. So try and kill any BYOD initiatives. With any devices that are, out there in the field that are going to be connecting through VPNs, you want to practice vulnerability management. What is vulnerability management? Well, uh, this is where you kind of track and mitigate your known weaknesses. And these are on your host or your appliances or any kind of computer equipment out there. So you have a list of all your assets. In that list, you should have what software is running on that device, what operating system is running on that device, what patch level they're at, what service pack level, etc. Along with the versions on there. It's called an inventory or a CI. CI is often referred to as a configuration database or configuration of itemization of these databases. So you would have this, and then if a vulnerability is introduced from a vendor, like a CVE comes out and it tells you what it is, you can cross-reference what your inventory says you have and do that, and then implement a patching strategy based on that. Now, key points to remember in that middle bullet point is everything is vulnerable to attack. Doesn't mean the attack will be successful, but anything and anyone can be attacked at any time, and the probability it will be attacked is always approaching 100%. So always remember that. So you want to also use tools that kind of test your environment, including your VPN systems, checking for missing patches. These can be items like a tripwire, software, which checks your patching levels. You can have Qualys scans out there that can kind of scan your network for vulnerability scans for that kind of stuff. These are tools that go out there and scan your devices for a lot of different things. And these are kind of major ones that a lot of companies use for that kind of stuff. The tripwire checks your configuration devices and all that. It creates a hash table of all your files and stuff. Your Qualys kind of checks for known exploits and other vulnerabilities there. So you're going to get these different tools that can do different things to make sure you know your posture and your vulnerabilities. One of the important things to do is get away from just using passwords. So multi-factor authentication has been somewhat harder to crack, and this is something like where you enter your credentials and then you have a password or a PIN for that. And so you enter that, so it's something and then you have something else like a smart card that has like a cat card certificate on there. If you ever look at your little credit cards that has a little gold little thing or silver thing on there, that little chip looks like. These are chip and pins, proximity cards. Any of these items are there that can do this. If you own a Apple or iPhone, you can have either the fingerprint scanner on the older versions, or nowadays they use the face scan for biometric reading of that thing. So it's something something you have, or something you are that can be used for multi-factor authentication. So what you want to do next is after you've implemented your multi-factor, it comes time for the golden rule. Document, document, document. You want to make sure you document your implementation plan. Okay? This is a step-by-step of what you're going to be doing. I like to call these the playbooks. The first thing we're going to do is after you unbox it, you're going to walk it through racking and stack it. You stack it in there and you cable it, and you specify which cables go. Blue cable goes in port and the management port. The yellow cable goes into port 1. The pink cable goes to port 2, etc. So you have a plan of where these cables go. In case one of these systems goes down in the middle of the night, and you can send one of your minions over there to go replace it, you can hand them the playbook and they can follow this down. So, uh, this allows you to just kind of run and play, and let it go. So, a good playbook with good instructions of everything you do is awesome. Screenshots and pictures, like if you're taking a photograph of something, like of a rack and stack of a physical thing, great. If you're doing a configuration, uh, take screenshots of the wizards and everything you're going to click on. Take a screenshot and document it along with that. It may take a little bit of extra time, but it's time it's worth it's worth so much. Trust me on this. When you have something good to do like that. After we've done that, we're going to look at monitoring our VPN availability. So availability is one of the things in the CIA triad: confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Availability is just as important as the other two. So there's a lot of issues when your VPN. What happens when that help desk starts ringing and everybody's like, "Hey, our VPN's not working." You're gonna be like, "Huh?" And you're gonna have to figure out how to get those coming in. So you're gonna have to discover some, what are your major issues when those things happen. So you're gonna use the same kind of monitoring equipment that you monitor, routers and switches and other networking gear for that. This is usually something like a network monitoring device. Um, Network General has one. Um, you have Wireshark is a great tool. I've used Microsoft Network Monitor. Uh, there's a lot of different ones. Cisco has one. There's just tons of them out there. Um, you can also look at your logs and all that kind of good stuff. So one of the things you want to do is to get a some kind of smart alert sensor to kind of let you know when something might be going down, so it alerts you ahead of time. That goes to like a SIM, security incident event monitoring system. Those also help out to track, where changes are occurring or where something might be down, and it could help you preemptively alert that. Um, if something bad does happen, you want to let your bosses know. Let it go all the way up to senior management to know that there's going to be temporary problems, so they can work on communication going out uh, to help them that something's not working. Let them know that we're on it. Leadership can take that heat for you and craft communication to the employees who are utilizing that. So that's really important to do also. And it's also important to understand your VPN capacity. So when something bad happened, like we just talked about before, this can be because, everyone is using your VPN. And you said, well, I only thought I'd have, maybe 300 people on it. And now you're figuring out there's over 1,000 people using it. And you're like, well, that's a lot more than I scoped out for. So you want to check out that usage and see how it's growing. And if you see it growing over time and say, hey, a lot of people are really liking this VPN stuff and they're using it more and more, you may have to look at expanding out your capacity for that VPN. So that's one thing you always have to do. You also want to check out and remove the users who are like no longer with the company. You want to take away their VPN access. You want to take, somebody was only supposed to use the VPN temporary. If they're an in-office user, but they had to like work from home for a certain amount of time. You may, when they're back in the office, you may want to take away their VPN capability to connect in. You may also want to investigate, when you have a single employee, you know, they're working from home in Akron, Ohio, and then there might be another connection from them that's sourced from, you know, Nairobi, Kenya. That might be a hint that something ain't right there. So, you know, these are kind of things you want to check for and make sure that there's not concurrent, connections coming in. If he's in two places at once, then he has devolved into the quantum realm and is somehow, thwarting all known physics rules. at the same time. So you want to kind of find out if that's the case and learn how he became a superhero or she became a superhero. So, yeah. But reality, it's probably somebody impersonating somebody else, and something bad's probably happening. You want to suspend access for those who, let's say somebody is going on a leave or sabbatical. You may want to turn off their access to VPN. Let's say if you have somebody who is going to take a vacation and go to China or North Korea or one of those places, that might not be so amenable to U.S. policies. They are known to, you don't want to allow them to connect in to your VPN and get that kind of information going through their networks. So, where they have kind of like a nanny system or something like that of their internet. And there's a lot of countries that have that nanny system. Countries you wouldn't expect, like Egypt, always monitors every one of their users' internet traffic. And there's, I think, a lot of other countries do too. So you maybe want to be cautious and find out if somebody's going out of the country. You don't want them to VPN in from a place where all traffic is intercepted and monitored. It's also best practice to back up, and back up. So back up your VPN configuration regularly in case you need to restore it, and always patch as soon as possible. So we're going to deploy a VPN policy now. So what we want to do is create the restrictions that who is not allowed to access the organization's VPN. We're going to prohibit that bad old split tunneling, of course. We're going to define the classes of employees that can access VPN, so like executives, sales folks. You don't want to let your janitorial staff, maybe have VPN access in unless there's something particular that they would need to do. So you're going to have to do an evaluation of everybody's functions to do these kind of things. You want to also define what kind of VPN connections are going to be allowed and permitted. Are we going to allow them 24-hour VPN access, or outside of the workday, shut it off at midnight? Yeah, there's different things we can do to kind of do controls on these VPN access. Are they going to be allowed to VPN from outside the country based on geographical locations? What are we going to have restrictions on? And then we're going to define the authentication methods. Are we going to make sure they're using their CAT card, which is the, like badge with the little security chip in there that they have to plug into their smart card reader that has a certificate issued to that smart card that is a personal identifier for them to only allow them to VPN in? Or are we going to allow them to just, click and use a username and password? And it's also good to prohibit people from sharing their VPN credentials. A hacking incident occurred where people were going out and they were finding contractors who were working for corporations that maybe had 1 or 2 weeks left before their contract was expiring and they were not going to be renewed. They were offering these contractors a cash sum if they would give them their VPN credentials. And some of these contractors, were like, "You give me $10,000 and I'll get you my corporate username and password for a week?" Sure. And they were doing it. And they were like hacking into Microsoft. They were hacking into just, a lot of companies in Europe and all that where they had this. So, it was called the Lapsus Gang. And they were getting some pretty good information hacking by paying off folks. So you want to make sure you prohibit that VPN sharing of credentials. In that policy, you kind of want to develop the requirements like for hardening for the remote hosts, including like antivirus protection and malware protection, uh, host intrusion detection systems, personal firewalls, those kind of things. You can prohibit the use of BYOD, bring your own devices, or personal equipment. You want to also define the encryption levels. So you want to say, okay, I want to have, encrypted with 256-bit, connectivity versus maybe 1024-bit, or something, something ridiculous like 8-bit. You don't want to do something like that. If the VPN is going to be used for site-to-site or network-to-network configuration, you need to define the approval process, who's going to do the approval, what management needs to be in there, how many approvals need to be done to do these network-to-network connections for those purposes. These could be like from remote offices VPNing in, stuff like that. We talked about that site-to-site. This is what we're talking about for that. And you always want to have your policy reviewed and approved by communications teams, the human resources group, and the legal thing to make sure all the proper legalese is in there. And then you want to make sure you communicate the policy to all employees prior to them using a VPN, to where they have to agree to these policies explicitly. So you want to also, when you're doing the criteria, you want to basically come up with the types of VPN connections the solution is going to support, user access site to site, both, etc. The encryption protocols, how many VPN connections are going to be supported in total, how the encryption protocols are supported, how does the VPN perform compared with a high-speed network versus a lower-speed network, how does the VPN interoperate with your existing network infrastructure. You want to determine what's the best support options available from the vendor and what rates they can do to help you get that up. How easy is it to set up and deploy a VPN? What are the management capabilities of VPN? Can I incorporate, posture checking? Can I incorporate enforcement of policies? Can I do endpoint modifications if I need to, or patching through my VPN? These are kind of features like the quarantining I mentioned earlier. These are a lot of things that are really good to have out there. So you can also see what other features they offer. Then you want to see what kind of failover or redundancy support they have for high availability configurations. And how can you scale out your VPN? So these are some things, for capacity planning. It's really important to have it out there. So let's talk about a couple of architectures. The first one for deployment is to put it parallel to the firewall directly connected to the internet. VPN is not firewalled, and you connect into your VPN and you're bypassing the firewall. So this is called the bypass model. Not recommended. All right, now a common architecture is the internally connected. So you have the internet here, the VPN connection. You have firewall rules that allow the VPN traffic to go to the VPN, and then the VPN is connected. So you're placing your VPN into like a DMZ zone or something like that behind a firewall. So it's an internally connected VPN that allows connectivity. Well, here's the DMZ one. Sorry, I spoke too soon. There you have the VPN between in a DMZ situation, so it's connected in, and then you can have additional rules that say what traffic after the VPN is allowed to connect into your internal network. So your VPN, they can connect into the VPN, no problem. And then what they access on your internal network is controlled by that firewall that's underneath that VPN there. So we have a lot of different ways to configure it, and there's more granular controls of that. So to deploy your VPN successfully, you gotta have to determine where is it going to be at. So where's it going to be at? Which data centers you're going to have it in at, and all that. You want to make sure that the location, uh, and this is a lot of where people don't really fully grasp that there needs to be enough power for the equipment to go into the racks and all that. Uh, a lot of people never take the power considerations in, and a lot of the VPNs and cooling, they put too many things in a data center or an area of the data center, and it exceeds the amount of power coming in on the wires, and then you have that circuit breaker that goes pow, and everything goes down. So that's always not a good thing to happen. So you want to make sure you have enough power and cooling resources, that HVAC stuff, to make sure the equipment is in proper working condition. Uh, you want to also make sure you have the correct addressing established and pre-planned before you implement, and the internal routing and connections for your VPN to use, as well as a pool of addresses that can be assigned out to those clients. So those need to be available too. You need to have the firewall rules enabled for your VPN to work. So you can't just put the VPN in there and automatically have the firewall configured and working. So you have to have all those things enabled for the firewall to work, or the VPN to work through the firewall. You also need to configure the VPN server by, setting up, enabling the ports and IP assignments and addresses interfaces. The messaging, sometimes VPN you'll get a pop-up message saying, "Hey, this is a restricted system. Any usage that's not authorized is persecutable by the fullest extent of the laws of blah 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 blah, etc." These things are out there. You need to make sure there's a mechanism that can go in there and disable split tunneling. That means all traffic from that client has to be directed through that VPN, where it can be monitored by your corporate systems. You also make sure you have to have your VPN set up to do proper authentication, whether it's going into your Active Directory or whatever your IAM solution might be. It needs to be configured to use that, and you need to make sure that's working for all your things. And then you also must make sure that everything is following your organization change management policies and procedures. So once you get the VPN on the network, create a pilot group to test it out. This is called UAT, or user access testing. And they kind of go in there and they beat it up the best they can and use it and have fun with it. A lot of times it's referred to as the beta testers, the pilot group out there. From that, you're going to figure out what went wrong, what went right. You're going to develop an operations manual. You're going to use them to develop user documentation based on what they do and all that. And remember, it's a small group of people that are more technical savvy, hopefully, than just, grabbing, a couple folks from the sales department, or, Sally from sales, uh, Art from accounting, etc., those kind of things. Uh, you know, you want to grab, your techies to play around with it. You want to then make sure your management is understanding your rollout plan and the phases in which it's going to be rolled out and which employees are going to be affected. Then you're going to develop a plan to install the VPN client to those who are remote users for that. And then if you're using some kind of clientless VPN, you want to configure the software for them. And then you're going to distribute your, authentication tokens, CAT cards, smart cards, whatever it is. And then you're probably going to provide some training for your users. So remember what he said earlier. Anything can be attacked. So let's look at hardware VPN security vulnerabilities. A lot of these are weak passwords. So you can go on there and do internet searches of the default password for a lot of systems. And the search engine will come back and tell you the default passwords for a lot of systems out there. Well, there's some search engines that will go out and look for, who has management ports enabled on the internet. And you can go in there and start randomly testing that default password for admin, or whatever password it might be. So the insecure or default configurations or misconfigurations by, you hired some guy to install it. This is usually the low bid contractor who doesn't know anything. And they promise they can do it cheap. They don't do it right, but they can do it cheap. So that's always something you can do. And so these are some of the big issues with that. With software vulnerabilities, software VPN vulnerabilities. These can be operating system vulnerabilities. These can be operating system misconfigurations. They left admin on the operating system maybe enabled. You might have an application conflicting with it, where you may have something else like a remote control software for troubleshooting that might be using the same ports as your VPN that could cause a conflict. You can have application conflicts other than that. You can have instability of your systems, like say the fan goes out, it gets overheated, your system starts just shutting down randomly. That's instability. And of course, viruses and other malware can be on the box, which can be bad. So some of the vulnerabilities that are common to hardware and software implementations alike, denial of service attacks. Okay, those can be bad. Missing patches. If you forget to patch, that can be a problem. Backdoor attacks. Any of y'all ever heard of Huawei? A Chinese company that left a lot of backdoors in their equipment that allegedly people from the Chinese government were using to access remote networks to implement spying techniques on other companies and countries. There's also I like this one, unpublished vulnerability in code. This is called a bug. There's bugs. Okay, so unpublished vulnerability in code, or what we commonly call our bugs in the code. There's also the weak client security. Any antivirus will do. Whatever you can find on the internet and download something for free might be there. It's good enough. Weak authentication. Password of password 1. Hey, that's common out there. That's really common. Hairpinning, where they are allowing you to connect in and then go right back out without actually, without having any other controls on the traffic. So you're connecting the VPN and then you go out to anywhere on the internet unfiltered. That's kind of hairpinning out there. And then of course, hey Joe, I need to get in the VPN. What's your username and password? It's Joe, and it's password 1. Yeah, you have that credential sharing. You want to prohibit that. So let's look at some ideas out here. So when we're doing our deployment, you're going to come across commercial and open source VPNs. So the benefits of the commercial solution, they're usually pretty easy to install and manage. There's available management tools, there's vendor support, and there's also hardware maintenance. Open source it's low cost, it's flexible, It's very extensible. You can customize it. You can run it on any hardware you can find. And you have access to internet-based support, i.e., you have to like do search engine queries to see if somebody else is running the problem, and they bother to publish their solution. You have to rely on the faith of others in the community, you know. So these are some things out there. One of the other things you're going to look at is based on anonymity versus privacy. What is anonymity? That is the ability of a network or a system to remain unknown. There are things out there that support anonymous access. These include Tor and Viper VPN. Uh, Anonymity solutions do not always protect your privacy. For instance, Tor is the Onion network, or the Onion router, rather. This was developed by the United States Navy. Um, People who go in there think they have anonymity. You do have some, but eventually you're going to come across somebody who is monitoring a Tor node you go across, and they're going to be able to trace you back. So they're not always as private as you think, or anonymous as you think. Now, privacy is the keeping information about a network or system from being disclosed. So you don't want to have that disclosure out there. And one of the good things about a VPN connection, it encrypts the data and it does protect your privacy. So there's some things out there. There's a difference between like the Viper VPN and Tor versus a VPN, a true VPN, where it has that true encryption out there. So we're looking at protecting your VPN software to support availability. So you always want to at least implement a pair of them so you have that redundancy in there. We talked about redundancy earlier. And we want to make sure that we configure highly available pairs. It's best practice. There's protocols out there like HSRP and VRRP, which allows for the protocols in case one of those systems goes down. It allows it to flip over. There's load balancers out there that are software and hardware. Um, and like you can route your VPN through, let's say, an F5 load balancer, which will create and do session management, and it detects if one of the VPNs is down. Like out there, a lot of the clouds systems have load balancing mechanisms out there to provide for, uh, that redundancy to direct traffic to any gateways that are remaining in case there is a failure. And then also you want to make sure, a lot of times you're going to see people that have multiple ISP connections to different ISPs. Let's say, where I work, there's some that are a couple of AT&T connections, there's a couple of Verizon connections, there's a couple of, I guess it's Comcast, or whatever it is, Comcast Business, or whatever it is nowadays. They change their name every 6 months or so. So we have different, companies out there that provide internet access, and these are usually telco or other type of communications related companies that do these. Um, the last but not least is the importance of user training. So first off, you need to have your staff trained, and they need to know how the VPN solution works, how to manage it, and how to support users. Then users kind of need the basics of how to do the connection, how to use it, how to make it functional. Uh, so you also need to have a VPN training incorporated into your new employee hire training if they're going to be using that. So that should be also out there. Now, troubleshooting the VPN. Um, to me, this is kind of common sense. To a lot of people, it's not intuitive. So you either get those that get it or those that don't. In my experience out there, but it's basically this: you identify the symptoms. So usually my thing is, what happened? You know, And then you're like, okay, this is what happened. In that way, you define the scope of the problem after that. So you identify the symptoms, what's going on, what happened, and then you go, okay, what changed? And you look for all the changes out there. Once you have that information, you can engage the vendor for their support. And they'll go through their script and tell you a couple of solutions to try. You're testing it, it's either going to work or you're going to break something else by this. Well, you're on your end, you're going to document everything you're doing because you might have to go back and reverse what you did. And if you don't remember what you did, especially if you're very tired, and this always happens in the middle of the night after you've had a really long day and you may have been asleep for maybe an hour and a half, so you're not mentally there. Always remember to keep documenting what you're doing so you have a thing. And then you always want to make sure you have good backups for everything in case you have to redo it. So let's go ahead. Remember, a VPN is going to have two interfaces. One that's connected to the internet. The other one goes into the internal network. It could go through a firewall or something like that. First thing you want to do is check the VPN is still on your local network. So you ping that. You want to check it from the internet. See if you can still connect to it on the internet. If one of them's available and the other one's not, you kind of know where to start going. Ping command is a great thing to do, but it's kind of getting a lot of places on the internet are blocking ping, so it may work, may not work. Traceroute's another one that I like to use a lot for that, and that's good to see your routing. Maybe a routing changed. I've had something where my VPN has gone down. I started doing a traceroute, and my ISP had an issue, and so it started. I saw a loop in a bunch of routers at my ISP, and it started doing a circular loop. So I was able to see where they had it, and I called up my ISP, and they looked at their routers and like, oops, somebody had a typo in their script when they did their update. So traceroute can be really good to do that. There's other commands like path ping and other things like that can do that too. Here is a representation of somebody pinging an IPv6 address, and this is kind of doing it. How would an IPv6 ping looks like? All right, now there's other tools. You can use internet-based tools um, out there like networktools.com. You can do a trace route from their equipment and see how it is in case you want to check it from another part of the world. So instead of from your area, you can see the trace route tool there, and it goes to, hey, look at that, there's a router here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. So you can see how that goes from wherever that is. All right, and next, we're going to talk about what we already talked about. We talked about the best practices for managing those VPNs. We're going to talk about that. We already talked about the VPN policy creation. We talked about the VPN deployment and planning for the enterprise. We talked about the general nature and source of threats against the VPNs, and we did a little talk about VPN troubleshooting. So, hope you enjoyed this lesson, and I'll see you again in the next chapter, chapter 11, next.